Hey everyone, welcome to episode 117 of The Green Life. In today's episode, I'll be talking to Justin Nault, the founder and CEO of Clovis. Justin has a very interesting story because he didn't become a health and wellness practitioner because he really wanted to. It was out of a very interesting episode in his life that pushed him to know more and do better. Before that, he actually was a musician and he had his own band. Now, I'll let him tell you all about that though. Before, I want to give a big shout out to Nama Well for the J2 juicer. You guys know I love my juicer, so I asked Nama for 10% discount code that you can use to get yourself one of those if you're on the market for a new machine. I'm also an affiliate of Dr. Morse's Herbs as well as New Zest and Wunda Workshop. Those are all products I personally use myself. So if you want to try them out, the discount code and the links are in the show notes too. All right, guys, without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with our guest. Hello, Justin. Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for joining me on The Green Life today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, so I have done a little introduction of you, and it's really fascinating how you're focusing on helping people with their metabolic health, so that they have a good relationship with food. And you and I agreed on speaking about the necessary changes that are needed in society to move from a hyper-processed food approach to a more whole food, so that we can really look after our health and our body. Now, we both have different approaches to nutrition. I'm fully plant-based and you have a more omnivore approach, but I think when it comes to the basic of wanting to have whole food, we both agree that that's really the best way forward. But before we get into that conversation, I really would love for you to introduce yourself and your company Clovis and the projects you've been working on, and how you've been helping people and what got you into this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a certified nutritional therapist, and I'm now the founder of 3 different companies. I own a couple of supplement companies, one of them being Clovis. And then I have a whole range of metabolic health coaching programs that are basically helping people take back their health through the lens of self-love, abundance, and nourishment. Because what I've found, I've been doing this for my own personal journey is 25 years now, and then working with others is close to 20 years at this point. And I find that really all of health and wellness at this point is like people kind of carry this false belief that getting healthy sucks. Right? It's like constant restriction. I need to go to the gym. I can't eat my favorite foods. It's like this suffering sacrifice. I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day and starve myself. And we see the evidence of that. Like we're recording this in January. So 85% of people who set a New Year's resolution for health, they've already quit. Right? That's kind of what the statistics show. Yeah. And it's because of this sort of no pain, no gain approach, trying to like beat your body up to make it look a certain way. And it's just a tremendous lack of self-worth and self-love. It's like this constant cycle of punishment that I've been trying to get people out of. And the reason why I do this work, there's a number of reasons. There's one massive catalyst that I'll share that happened in my late 20s. But for me, it was because I grew up in the 90s and I was a very overweight little boy. I was, in the 90s, the non-politically correct term for it is I was a fat kid. And I grew up watching action movie heroes like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. I'm like, that's what a man is in my little boy mind. And I developed a really poor relationship with my own body image very young that became like full-blown body dysmorphia. And by age 15, like Muscle and Fitness magazine became my Bible. And I'm comparing myself to these 6-pack abs guys that I didn't know were like loaded full of steroids. So I'm comparing myself to something unnatural. By age 15, I was lifting weights 2 hours a day. I was running on a treadmill an hour a day, just like trying to punish my body fit, as they would say. Yeah. And then I became a professional musician. So before I knew it, I'm living in Nashville. I'm playing 300 shows a year. I'm on stage every night. I had a reality TV show on ABC by the time I was 25. I had a thriving YouTube channel at the time. So it's really just like I'm living this kind of faux rock star life, but inside I'm just a little boy with body dysmorphia, and now I'm under spotlights. So the fitness became more and more extreme in my 20s. So it was, 2-a-day CrossFit at one point. I hired an Olympian to teach me Olympic lifting. I became a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I was a boxer. I was running Tough Mudders. I was doing bodybuilding, all these things. And no matter what, my body never looked the way that I wanted it to. And in my late 20s, speaking of what we talked about, that was my first introduction. I discovered the paleo diet from a documentary film called In Search of the Perfect Human Diet, which was just like the first I'd seen of like an ancestral way of eating, as you would call it. But really, the core of it, like you and I talked about before recording this podcast, is like, oh, there's no hyper palatable, ultra processed junk foods in this list of foods that they're saying I should be eating. And before I knew it, I just started melting body fat. I was like, this is some kind of cheat code that I didn't know about. And I was doing well in the music industry at that point. I'd built a decent life for myself. So in my spare time, I became a nutritional therapist in hopes of learning about epigenetics so I could heal myself. And around that same time, my niece was born terminally disabled. And she was having over 300 seizures a day when she was born. Yeah, it was crazy. So the first few months of her life was myself and my family in the pediatric ICU. They ran over $1 million in testing on her. They couldn't figure out what the diagnosis was. They gave her less than 3 years to live as life expectancy because of the severity of it. And then eventually they had to, my brother and his wife had to make the decision to drill a hole in her stomach, and they feed her through something called a G tube because the baby couldn't eat or drink. And in a medical setting, the ketogenic diet is used to suppress and manage epileptic seizures. So this is over 10 years ago now, and that was my first introduction to what is now known as keto, right? And I'm like, okay, this is like a medical thing that they're doing and really suppressing seizures. It showed me the power of food. But also, it was mainstream medicine. So they were giving her a ketogenic baby formula called Keto-Cal. It's made by Gerber, which is owned by Nestle. Our tax dollars subsidize it. It's in every pediatric ICU in the country, and it is toxic sludge. It's high fat, low carb, so it fits the so-called category of keto, but all of the fats are what we would now call seed oils, like hydrogenated vegetable oils, artificial flavors and sweetenings, which doesn't make any sense because it's not touching the baby's taste buds going through a G tube. And then a lot of the vitamins they're using are synthetic versions of vitamins that not only are not usable by the body, but they're gunking up the receptors in the body, causing more harm than good. So I pointed out the ingredients to a very renowned neurologist, and he looked at me like a scene from a movie, and he goes, I never thought to check that. And that really is how we got here today. I was so mad, and I realized like this is probably a very kind human being. He's trying to help. He's not trying to hurt anybody, but he's part of a broken system. And I realized nobody's coming to save us. So I started ordering biology and biochemistry textbooks from different colleges, started studying human metabolism. I made a baby formula for my niece Savannah in my kitchen with food dehydrators and food processors. We got it cleared by the neurologist to feed it to her. He was like, yes, this is a better formula. We'll give this to the baby. That led to my first supplement company. And then I just started getting on Facebook Live and sharing what I was finding, like the horrors of mainstream medicine. Mainstream medicine is the third leading cause of death in America. So I started sharing what I was finding there, and I started sharing the corruption between big food and big pharma and the government and ultra-processed foods and how we got here, the history of ultra-processed foods and how they got to America, which leads us to today. It's now, that was over 10 years ago, and now it's 650,000 followers and thousands of transformation stories. And part of the reason I was excited to talk to you is if we look at all these different things that people are doing, it's carnivore, it's keto, it's paleo, it's Whole30, it's vegan, it's vegetarian, plant-based, whatever. The core thing that they all have, they're all busy fighting about their differences, but the core thing that they all have in common is remove the poison from your life and you will get healthier. So that's the number one thing that I talk about today.
I love that. And I must say your story and mine are very parallel. I grew up in the 80s, so I'm a little bit older, but the typical woman that is perfect is like the sticky thin girl on the covers of the magazines. And plus my mom had eating disorders. She was bulimic. And so I grew up seeing that. And I always had a terrible relationship with food. And like you in my 20s, I was working out 2 hours a day. I was doing 1 hour solid cardio and then 1 hour weights. And my body was just never what I wanted it to be. Fast forward to now, I just understand what I was doing to my hormones on top of it. So I actually specialize in women's hormones and our cycles and how to eat and work out for our cycle. And of course, I do it on a plant-based diet, mostly because when I decided to go plant-based, I realized that I had some blood work that wasn't great. I listened to some lectures from a few doctors that are plant-based, and they were talking about high fat and animal products, and I was like, this resonates because I've tried to really be healthy, eating chicken and fish and lots of veggies and really restricting everything else, and my blood work wasn't looking good. And when I tried that, it did. But then after a couple of months, we went for Thanksgiving to New York, and I didn't want to offend my, at the time, boyfriend's mom. So I had turkey. And for the
Yeah.
first time when I ate it, I was like, oh my God, this is flesh. So I'm actually an ethical vegan as well.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I focus on plant-based because of that too. But I also realize that a vegan diet is not necessarily healthy, because just like a mainstream diet, a vegan diet nowadays, especially where you have a lot of options that are, in the stores that are vegan, they are junk. They're full of absolute crap. And so people can go vegan, but I've seen a lot of vegans being incredibly unhealthy. And then of course we blame the diet when it's like, no, actually you haven't changed your approach to food. All you've done is just remove the animal products, but you're still keeping high sugars, high fats, and lots of oils and things that you don't need, and like lots of chemicals in there. Like your body is not
Yeah.
meant to process those things. So I definitely find that that's where your approach and my approach really connect, but also the very fact that we experience it firsthand to go through these struggles with our body. And I loved what you say about kindness and self-love. It's always missing when we talk to dietitians, for example, or nutritionists. Sometimes that part, like, nutrition is not just the food that we eat, it's actually what we feed our life with. So, and that's more important, because I realized that a lot of the struggles I had with food were actually my emotions, as I was using food as a crutch. So thank you for doing that. That is amazing, for sharing. And also, wow, the work that you did for your niece, I mean, that is groundbreaking. That alone, I think, is really eye-opening, because as you said, the doctors never looked at that, and it
Yeah.
is part of a broken system that unfortunately doctors, what do they get, 3 days of nutrition in 7 years, 10 years of medical
Yeah.
school. So
Yeah.
it's not great.
It's
And
not great.
no. And so okay, so there's a lot to unpack, because you do so many things. And let's start from how you talked about approaching people with self-love. And now it's January, and a lot of people are like, by the time this goes out, it will be February, but like then, by then, definitely a lot of people have just quit the resolutions in
Yeah.
January. So
Mhm.
it's I love to talk to you about how you approach your clients so that they get the mindset that is necessary for sticking on a new lifestyle, new habits, rather than a restrictive approach.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the core thing that I teach, if people go look at my social media, that I say over and over, is this concept of food versus poison. It makes a lot of people really angry if I'm calling strawberry Pop Tarts poison. How dare you call this poison? Blah blah blah. In my subjective reality, it is. And when I treat it as poison, my life gets better. And when clients treat it as poison, my life gets better. But to your point about the self love, the self worth, and everything, if we all have this experience where we remove the toxic junk from our food, our life improves. I use this phrase with my coaching clients: how you do something is how you do everything. So now you have to analyze all the other places in which you are allowing toxicity. And this is, emotionally abusive, toxic romantic relationships. This is relationships with your family or your community where you don't have clear boundaries, where you feel like you're self-betraying, you're people-pleasing. You went to your boyfriend's house for Thanksgiving and you gave up your own philosophy of nutrition to eat turkey because you didn't want someone else to feel weird. This kind of thing that I find 85% of my clients are women, and mostly moms. And the amount that these moms have been people pleasing and putting everyone else first and putting their needs on the back burner for so many years, and they're almost wearing it like a badge of honor, of like everyone else comes first. And I just bring them back to, every time you're on an airplane, they say in case of turbulence, the oxygen masks will fall. You're supposed to put your oxygen mask on first before you assist others. Because if you pass out, you can't help anybody, right? The same is true in life. So this is why no matter what program people do with me, whether it's private coaching or an online course or whatever, everyone gets self-love, daily non-negotiable practices. Because what we're doing is, if I want bigger biceps, I have to go do bicep curls.
Yeah.
The same is true of self-love. Self-love has become this sort of vague, abstract thing that people don't really know what it means. Well, just love yourself more. And that almost pisses people off because they're like, well, listen, if I don't love myself, you reminding me that I don't love myself, it makes it blah, 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 right? So
And
in the
also, what
beginning, I
does
was
it
like,
mean? Like, what does it mean to love myself?
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a great question. The biggest, I got asked that on a podcast recently. And I was like, okay, how do we explain? The woman was asking me to explain what it feels like when you love yourself versus when you don't. Because in the past I didn't, and now I do. And I sat there like in silence for like 3 minutes, and I'm like, man, I'm being a terrible guest right now. But I had to try to figure out how to explain it because it's a bit like psychedelics, right? If someone comes to me and they're like, what is ayahuasca like? I'm going to try to describe it in words, but I really can't. It's like one of these things that you have to experience. So when I tried to describe it in words, what I initially settled on is when you love yourself deeply and you're grounded in your own self-worth and your own self-love, other people's opinions no longer matter, and I mean at all. It's like water off a duck, right? So again, to all the nutrition battles that happen online, whose diet is the best diet, blah, blah, blah. I live in a world where I'm so grounded in self and I love myself so much and I trust my internal authority so much that I don't need to make someone else wrong in order for me to know that I'm right.
Yeah.
So the debate goes away. Other people's opinions go away. If I'm at a restaurant and I order my food a certain way and someone makes comments about it, I no longer get defensive or feel a need to, validate myself or my own choices or prove why I'm right and they're wrong. I'm like, this is just the way that I eat. How do you eat? Tell me more. Cool. Amazing. That's great. Let's have a meal together. It becomes much, much easier. And I think that a lot of the reason why I think there's a statistic that like the average woman tries something like 126 diets in their lifetime.
Oh, are they even that many?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like it's really all the same thing: restriction, suffering, sacrifice, with 1,000 different labels on it. And now it's the Atkins diet. Now it's the beach diet or whatever. Now it's Whole30. Now it's keto, whatever, right? So I think that there's such a lack of self-love, and we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own intuition. So we always assume that someone else knows better than we do. So we bounce around from thing to thing to thing to thing. And like you said, with a vegan diet, they're not really understanding the core philosophy of health, how to choose their own health and wellness. So they're being guided in 1,000 different directions. They're really putting in probably maximum 50% effort into all these different things. And it leads to this kind of weight loss roller coaster, up, down, up, down, up, down. People gain and lose the same weight for their entire lives because they don't realize that true health and wellness is an identity shift. It's not a named diet. It's not Clovis. It's not vegan. It's not carnivore. It's not whole. It's just choosing things that nourish your body, that are health promoting, and staying away from the things that damage your body. So if you think about it through the lens of self-love, right? If I have a client who comes to me drinking 10 Pepsis a day and they love their Pepsis and they don't want to lose it, right? If I say you're not going to drink that Pepsi for the next 90 days, it's very easy to fall into victimhood mentality. Oh, this sucks. Here's another nutritional therapist telling me that I can't have my favorite thing and I hate this and dieting sucks and blah, blah, blah. Or with the identity shift, the lens changes and it becomes, I know that that is harmful for my body and I love myself so much that I would never knowingly put something in my body that harms me. So that's kind of the difference.
I love that. But how do you get them there? Because when you try and explain this to someone that doesn't know how it feels to love yourself that much, like I did a post yesterday about we don't put value on health because it's not as tangible as something we buy that we actually paid in cash for. And even sometimes when I see people get sick and they still don't put value on their health, they're like, okay, I'll take a pill for this. So give me 3 top exercises that you get people to do to actually have that little connection and create this pathway in their mind so they're like, oh, this is what self-love feels like, this is what I should think about. Because I think people just are not aware, so they're like, well, I'm not gonna like thinking about what is good for me, like what does it even mean?
Sure, yeah. So what we have to do, right, is like all of the exercises that I do around personal development and self-worth are rooted in something called Jungian depth psychology from the very famous Carl Jung, right? So we're actually reprogramming your neurology with these exercises that I built myself. I've created dozens of them that create these changes in human beings. So number one that everyone gets is daily mirror work. Daily mirror work is standing in a mirror, looking yourself in the eyes, and it starts with saying, I love you out loud while making eye contact with yourself 10 times. And really trying to mean it. And if you don't in the beginning, that's okay. If you're faking it in the beginning, that's okay. So we start with the I love yous, and then we have 3 different things that we do. One is 5 statements of I'm proud of you for. So out loud, talking to yourself, you're saying, I'm proud of you for A. I'm proud of you for B. I'm proud of you for C. They can't be the same. You got to come up with different ones every time and different ones every day. And then from there, we move on to I forgive you for. And you're stating 5 things that you're ready to move on from. Hey, I did this thing. I hate the way that I feel about it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking of this thing that I did 10 years ago. Well, I'm ready to forgive myself for that and move on. And then the last thing is 5 statements of, I commit to you that. X, Y, Z, commitment statements. And what I've helped people see is that the fastest way to improve self-love, to kind of like fill the meter of self-love, is simply to keep commitments to yourself. So if we go back to New Year's resolutions, I try to help people see that when you make a commitment, let's say all of 2024, you never got off the couch and you ate fast food every day and you didn't take care of your health. And January 1st, you decide, I commit to myself, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and I'm going to eat 1,200 calories and I'm going to remove all junk food and I'm going to drink a gallon of water a day and I'm going to sleep 8 hours a night, right? This is a self-sabotage behavioral pattern based on low self-worth and low self-love. You have to validate the internal belief that you already have, that you always fail, that getting healthy sucks, that you never stick to commitments to yourself. It's actually easier to stay in your comfort zone and live in the victimhood of I am someone who can't do the things that I say that I'm going to do. So that's from a place of low self-love, low self-worth. An actual commitment is meeting yourself where you are. And I'll give like a very easy example because someone may be in this place where they need to meet themselves where they are and get honest with their self-awareness. It may be that they stand in the mirror and they say, I commit to you that every day for the next 3 days, just the next 3 days, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to start my day with a glass of filtered water. That's it. And when we look at our life as forever, not a 3-week crash diet that we're trying to get the most out of and white knuckle grip our way through, then on day 3 of drinking the water, you put that glass down, you can put your hands in the air and go, I did it. I said I was going to do this thing. I said 3 days of water. I did it. This is amazing. And celebrate yourself. And then say, I commit to myself that I'm going to do that again for the next 7 days, right? And then a week later, you're celebrating that win. And then the next commitment might be, I commit to myself that every day I'm going to take one single 10-minute walk. I'm going to step outside. I'm going to set my phone timer for 5 minutes and I'm going to walk. When the timer goes off, I'm going to turn around and come home. So all of these tiny little commitments, we're making the commitment to self and then keeping the commitment to self increases self-worth. Whereas some big giant New Year's resolution that is impossible and is going to harm your body and you're going to feel terrible the whole time, you're going to quit that. You're going to break the commitment you made to yourself and you're going to repeat this cycle of shame and guilt and judgment of self that you're not good enough and you can't do the things. You're setting yourself up for failure. So the mirror work, that's exercise 1. Everybody gets that. And I know that was a bit of a long-winded response, so we can dig into other things if you want to, but I want to see how that resonates with you.
That was so good. That was brilliant, and I like it because I always tell people, even with moving your body, like starts with 5 minutes. Don't worry about having to go to the gym, because the thing is that your body's gonna start craving these things.
Yes.
Naturally, and then you're like, oh, I didn't drink my water this morning. I didn't move for 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes becomes 10 minutes, and then the water is every day, and you just create these habits because you know that they're part of your routine without you having to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like for someone like me, like let's say I go do a CrossFit workout. I don't do CrossFit anymore. I gave it up in my 20s because I realized it was bad for me. Right. But there was a time when I was 25 years old, I could go crush a CrossFit workout because I had been training every day for 10 years. So that CrossFit workout could arguably be beneficial for my body. But if I take someone who's never done any fitness, they're 100 pounds overweight, they're type 2 diabetic, they're dealing with high blood pressure, and I say, you do the same CrossFit workout I'm about to do, that's only harmful. That is not good for that person. And it's like you said with women as well, right? Like you train women based on their cycle. Almost all of the exercise physiology science we have was performed on male subjects.
Yeah.
And then we bring women in and we say, here's your 30-day program. And you're going to do 3 days a week of weightlifting and this much cardio, and we're going to train you like a man, even though your week-to-week hormonal fluctuations are exponentially different from that of a man. And we need to treat you differently when you're in your follicular phase, let's say. We're going to give you different types of workouts that honor your body.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to this internal intuition. What does your body need? And are you doing things that are nourishing your body and promoting health? Or are you just beating yourself up with some false belief that you're not good enough?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you nailed it. I mean, even with the food, right? Like we have this, I think people don't appreciate that science was unfortunately constructed on males mostly. And then they're like, women are just smaller men. we're not
Exactly.
smaller men. We're
Oh
totally
my
not.
God. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I saw something you talked about that I think is really, really key to go into. This is more about the nutrition part. So we get people to shift their mindset. First thing, very good. Then we have to make them understand that everything they learned about food and nutrition is actually wrong, like counting calories. And
Yeah.
I honestly want to just crash my head in the wall sometimes, because like I have these massive salads for my meal. I eat lunch and dinner together. So I have like a 3 o'clock meal, and then I will fast. Well, depending on the cycle that I'm in, but I will generally fast. From 3, 4 until the next day, and people look at my food and like, oh my god, you eat so much. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's a lot of food in here because I'm trying to pack as much micronutrients as I can.
Yeah.
But, and also, calories, and like making sure that I'm satiated and I'm feeling good. But I don't count calories per se. Like, I don't actually know how much I consume. Like, I did when I was reversing type 2 diabetes, just because I was counting with chronometer. So I knew, but, because I was counting how many fats I had, because I did the low fat, high carb approach, which I'm very happy about, because I actually build resilience towards insulin resistance. I know it's very different, like to what normally people do, going more like a ketogenic diet to reverse diabetes, and that has got validation too. But I wanted to really do it in a way that I'm not going to spike my numbers crazy, or not allowing them to come down, I should say, because spikes are normal. But if I had like a sweet potato, I wanted to make sure my body understood that good carbs are good carbs. So I don't really know how many calories I have, but I do eat a lot of volume just to get a lot of nutrients in. And people are always shocked, and they always go back to the calories. So I love for you to break that down, because I know I heard you say a calorie is not a calorie, which I agree with, and that we have to step away from this thing that, restriction of calories will mean a better health, and actually where the calories come from is way more important.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said about you understanding that you need to eat more calories to get the micronutrients in. So I would say, like, we could clear up all the confusion if instead of calories in, calories out, we taught nutrients in, calories out. Like, calories are a measure of the potential energy that exists within something. Like this is a cell phone case and credit cards, right? This cell phone case and credit cards, if we burn it, it creates energy. There is a caloric potential within cell phone case.
Guys,
If I eat
don't eat it. Don't eat it.
Exactly. If I eat 1,000 calories of celery of cell phone case, what do we think is going to happen if I put 1,000 calories of cell phone case into my body? Right? Like it's insane to think about.
Yeah.
And also understanding that the nutrients in determines the energy out, the calories out. So I always say it's like if you have a car, and we're not closed energy systems, we're not combustion engines, so it's a clunky analogy. But if you take a car and the gas tank is full, but that engine has no spark plugs, there is no energy. There's no energy to be had. There's a boatload of potential energy, the gasoline, but we need a catalyst to turn it into energy.
Yeah.
We have people, in the case of type 2 diabetes, right? Like the mitochondria are literally struggling to turn substrate into energy. So we have to heal you on a cellular level. We have to clean up the gunky spark plugs before you can make enough energy. And I always ask, when was the last time you met a clinically obese person who is dealing with high energy symptoms? They're like, I feel great all the time. I have so much energy. My libido is off the charts. My body temperature is usually warm. It's like, no. They're like, my hair is falling out. I have no energy. My sleep is terrible. I have no libido, and it's impacting my relationship. It's always low energy, low energy.
Yeah.
And the only answer from the mainstream is eat less.
Yeah.
Eat less of the thing that creates energy in your body. It's a fundamentally flawed system, And the other piece I want to touch on that you said about this idea that weight loss is always healthy is insane. There's an experiment from 1943, I believe, called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. And they took male subjects, again, always males, and they tracked their baseline calories, which was around 3,200 per day. And then they got their base metabolic rate, everything. They adjusted all these guys' calories to a place where they were taking in 1,000, a maximum. There was a range based on each individual, but the maximum they were allowed to eat was 1,575 calories per day. This, at the time, was considered a significant starvation diet. And how many people come to me today eating 1,200 calories a day, 1,100 calories a day, like trying to lose weight with this crazy low-calorie approach? So what happened in this experiment, I highly recommend people Google the Minnesota Starvation Experiment because the photos are staggering. So also keep in mind, this was before our entire food system was ultra processed junk. So these guys were eating nutrient dense whole foods. And when they stripped them down to 1,575 calories a day, they started hallucinating. They were fainting. They had trouble opening doors. They needed help walking up and down stairs. Some of these guys were trying to sneak bubble gum and eat it because they were so hungry. Did they lose weight? Yes. But their organs shrunk. Like on average, their liver shrunk by 40%. Their heart tissue shrunk by up to 27%. Their thyroid gland shrunk, right? Which means they were losing muscle mass, their bone density was decreasing. And that's why in today's society, we have something called sarcopenic obesity, which is a clinically obese person with a ton of body fat stored, low skeletal muscle mass, and low bone density, basically osteoporosis, right? To try to tell that person that they need to eat less food to solve their problem of their body cannibalizing itself, I mean, it should be medical malpractice. It's horrific. So the calories thing, and the only reason the calorie debate exists is because after the 1950s, once these food companies, actually cigarette companies who bought food companies, once they flooded the market with ultra-processed junk food, it was easier for them to tell people, pay no attention to nutrients over here, it's all about calories. And that's how we can justify flooding the market with foods that are high in calories that have no micronutrient density at all.
Oh, wow. And then you also have things that are like counting calories with points, like some associations that to get people to lose weight. But then when you look at the nutrient content of their food, because they actually do promote and make money from packaged food, that's not just the education, like the groups together, you can see that that's just not a good way to approach it. Like, I'm sorry, but like, why are we not talking about, what's on their plate, how they can cook at home, how they can know what's actually in their food rather than going to buy a branded product because that product will have 5 points or something. It doesn't even make sense.
It makes no sense at all. It really, like, a lot of my time, I'm sure with you as well in your work, I'm like, am I actually living in the Twilight Zone? Like, how is this the reality? And then we look around, right? It's like people are still going to their doctor, like asking their doctor for help. I'm like, listen, 90% of adults have one marker or more of clinical metabolic dysfunction. 75% of adults are overweight or obese. 45% of children are obese. The average adult over the age of 50 is on 12 prescription medications. In what world has this been a successful experiment of trusting the science and trusting the experts and, like, again, this illusion of authority, right? That's like, I get a lot of heat for that because I don't believe in credentials. I don't believe in academia. I don't believe in the systems that they've sold us. It's just, where did your textbooks come from? Who wrote the textbooks that trained you to be a medical doctor, that taught me that I need this medication instead of looking at the food that I eat? And this is where you have to be willing to stand in your own grounded truth. Like, I am totally comfortable with who I am and the things that I believe, and nobody's going to tell me what I should or should not eat. That's my decision.
I think you made a very good point there. So I'm like you, probably, like, I love educating myself. I could be an eternal student, but I definitely do it with an inquisitive mind and a big question mark on things. And I think by looking, especially with naturopathy, studying naturopathy makes you think, because now naturopathic schools have been integrated in the US in any case into the allopathic system. So you can go to a college and actually do naturopathy, which you couldn't do before, because in the 1910 you had the Flexner report that basically closed down every naturopathic school, because that was actually the way that you learned about medicine. And then, that was it. It was all about allopathic and science. Now, I don't knock science. I think, with our modern approach and the science that we have studied, even about, like, so many issues that we have, like even the fact that we have insulin for people that have type 1 diabetes, like, that's life-saving. So totally. There is definitely a benefit when it comes to surgery, definitely a benefit. But when it comes to chronic issues, chronic illness that are related to lifestyle, this is where we totally lose control. And I think the problem is that, as you said, food doesn't make money, but medicine does, like pharmaceuticals do, and they know it, and they just like, okay, we can make people feel powerless so that any choice they make is not going to change the fact that maybe they have cardiovascular disease. So you can take a statin, you can take anything that you can take like to lower your blood pressure instead of actually changing your lifestyle and diet because, well, you trust the medical system. And I don't think that doctors are innately like these evil people that want to, force. They really aren't. They've been taught. Doctor, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Michael Clapper, but he started this association called Moving Medicine Forward, which is when he goes into universities and he talks about the plant-based diet in his approach, but a diet that is clean from processed foods, and it's like, let's try and educate our future doctors before the pharmaceutical companies get to them, because otherwise they go into pharmacosis. So that's what he calls it, which is a really smart term. And it's true, like they don't, as we said, they maybe have 3 days of nutrition, and most of the time they just they learn what, okay, you have to give some supplements if there is like a deficiency. And actually at the beginning you mentioned how supplements in the formula that your niece was taking, they were not even from food, which is another thing I love to talk about when we talk about your brand, because that's such an important thing. It's really, really hard to navigate supplementations because they're not as regulated. And so, sometimes unfortunately you get, quacks that just talk about the vitamins, but they're not coming from the right sources. So we have to definitely be careful. But this is what doctors learn, right? Like, okay, there's a deficiency, you can give a vitamin. And so the issue is that they don't learn about the dynamics of food, which is also why when we have marketing sharing, for example, this is low carb, it's like you are isolating one single macronutrient and you're taking it out and you're not actually explaining to people what everything happens. This happens with protein, right? Like the protein craze. Everybody's obsessed about protein, and nobody actually, if you tell them, okay, what are proteins made of, they would not even know about amino acids.
Totally.
They don't know that the body actually has to break down the protein into different amino acids to use them. They're not like you eat them and boom, you have a bicep. So it's like, it's so funny because like that's perpetuating this illusion. But yeah, so I really would love for you to actually clarify, maybe let's step into that. I think it's a good segue from, we understand that calorie is not a calorie. We understand nutrition is much more complex and we need to go for food and not package things. But also the next thing is, if we need to supplement because we want to help our diet, because we do understand that our food system is a little bit lacking, our soils are struggling. I mean, it's a bigger problem than just food, and it's very, very vast. So, and it's a bigger problem than even the pharmaceuticals that we're talking about. But when it comes to supplementation, for example, how do we choose the right supplements? How do we know what to take and what, is appropriate even?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, like what I've done with Clovis is essentially I'm making products that are based on the statistics of the most common micronutrient deficiencies that exist in America, right? So 2/3 of Americans are deficient in magnesium. So I have a magnesium glycinate supplement that helps with that, right? The superfood powder, that's like my flagship powder that actually is a spin-off of the formula I created for Savannah. When you start reading that list, it's coming from whole foods, right? But we have MCT oil, we have turmeric, we have vitamin B12, vitamin B6, we have your collagen protein, we have all these different things, but they're sourced from whole foods. So we're basically like taking foods as they exist in nature and turning it into a freeze-dried powder that you add water to, and then you can drink these nutrients, right? So there is nothing, like man has not outsmarted nature, not by a long shot, right? Yeah. And this is where we get into understanding the quality of your food. When you talk to soil nutrient density is so important. And this is the thing too, right? Like the different camps of diets that like fight over things. I think there's a lot more in common in a lot of them than they realize. So like I helped fund a documentary film in 2016 called Sacred Cow that was all about regenerative agriculture, like regenerative farming practices, rather than like the pesticide-filled monocrop agriculture that we have in America to make like mountains of corn and wheat and all these things, right? So it's like when we speak to synthetic vitamins versus vitamins that come from food, the truth of the matter is we don't actually know what exists in food. We weren't able to identify vitamins until within the last 50 years in a scientific setting. Like we didn't know what vitamins were 100 years ago, So that also means that as our technology got better and we started isolating these little things, there are likely millions of compounds that we do not know how to assess, right? So for example, if you take like an organic apple, they've run studies on this. You can give somebody like a bite of apple. I think it was like, I can't remember what they measured, like 15 grams of apple or something like that. It had the vitamin C capacity in the human body of like a 1,500 milligram vitamin C supplement. But it doesn't make any sense because the vitamin C that is in that bite of apple is like 15 milligrams or something like that, right? So the way that the vitamin C from the apple works in the body is completely different than ascorbic acid that they might extract from corn or something, and they're taking just the vitamin C and giving it to you.
Yeah.
It behaves completely differently in the body. And if scientists are honest about this, they don't know why. Right? One of my dear friends is Dr. Anthony J. He's a PhD biochemist. He's the best-selling author of the book Estrogeneration, which talks about these estrogen-mimicking compounds in personal care products and sunscreen and birth control and all these things. And he worked at the Mayo Clinic for over 20 years. He worked for the US government as a virologist. And he tells me stories all the time. He's like, I was sitting at a table with 3 different Nobel Prize winning neuroscientists. And when you start asking them about neuroscience, they're like, the truth is, we have no idea what's going on. You know, he's like, the people at the top that are open-minded, and they got there because of their open-mindedness, they're very honest about the fact that we don't really know what's going on. So then you have the situation of food versus synthetic vitamins, where you get into these places, and I used to talk to Rob Wolf a lot about this. I worked with him on Sacred Cow, where he said he calls them hyperphysiological doses, right? So we're told vitamin B12 is good, right? So people will take a dose of synthetic vitamin B12, with methylcobalamin or whatever, that's like 10,000% of the RDA or something. And like the RDAs are not perfect. But we actually don't know what happens long term if we're hyperloading these synthetic vitamins in a way that we would never be able to get in nature, right? In foods that exist in nature. So the truth of the matter is, if anyone's honest about this, it's like a mixing board at a concert, right? We're pulling levels up and down and all around and twisting knobs, and we don't actually know what's happening. We don't know what effect that's going to have in the whole human organism, which is the piece that we get to about how scientific studies are conducted, right? Like there's a doctor today named Dr. Jack Kruse that talks a lot about quantum biology and the impact of light. So we now know that like in vitro studies, like Petri dish studies, where we're studying cellular biology, those are happening in basically sanitized like laboratories with fluorescent lighting. And this flickering fluorescent blue light is flashing on the cells. And we know like red light therapy is a real thing that has an impact on cells. So now we have to think about the fact that what's happening in this cell under fluorescent light in a completely unnatural environment is absolutely different from what's going to happen to your cells when you're out in the natural world and you're eating food and there's different lights in your body, right? We know that based on if you have like this ring light shining in my face and I eat a banana versus the next day I'm outside and the sun is on my skin and I eat a banana, I'm going to have a completely different blood glucose response. So I really think that this goes so much deeper than people realize.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to look back at the 1950s when doctors were coming to the hospital bedsides and serving people cigarettes. Like, you have asthma. You need these Camel cigarettes.
Oh my
Here you
goodness.
go. That used to be a real thing in hospitals. Yeah. And at the time, those people were like, these doctors, they're the smartest people we have in society. They know what's up. They're doing what's good for me. And they would light up that cigarette and smoke it because the doctor told them to.
Yeah.
We are in the same place today. 20 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, can you believe those dummies were loading prenatal vitamins with folic acid? Why would they do that? That's so bad for the fetus, right? That's going to happen 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And
it's already happening, I think. It's already happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Every generation thinks that they are the ones who figured it out and they are the smartest and everyone before them was dummies.
Yeah.
And they're proven wrong every time throughout history.
Yeah.
Like, if you think your science is correct, you just haven't waited long enough.
Yeah.
It's going to be proven wrong. So if we know that about science, then we have to go back to basics, which is nature.
Yeah.
How does this thing work? Right? There are no animals in the wild who get type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Do you know what animals do get type 2 diabetes? House
Our
cats and
pets.
dogs who eat people food. Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
So this is like the Twilight Zone thing where I'm like, what are we doing? What are we playing this game for? So I own 2 supplement companies and I'm here talking about these things, right? But I always have specific goals with my supplement companies in mind. Like my Amazon company, MedChoice, we try to replace harmful pharmaceuticals with ingredients that are derived from food. So our best-selling formula right now is one of the top-selling turmerics on all of Amazon. It's got 15,000 reviews if you want to go check it out. We just said, how do we replace these toxic, like Tylenol pain relievers with turmeric, garlic, and ginger, right? To get the anti-inflammatory feelings, to get the pain relief. And then how do we replace Ambien, where people are taking Ambien and sleepwalking and driving their cars around and not remembering it because Ambien is so toxic, and we give them a natural sleep aid that comes from plants, right? Like, how can we replace these harmful things? Because people do need support from supplements, and I believe the plant world is nature's pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just saying there's ways to do this that are not so harmful.
Yeah, I love how you said that. So I had Dr. I was surprised about it, and actually, but I had Dr. Joel Furman on the show. It is groundbreaking, and I actually love a lot of the work that is done, and it really does help a lot of people. He understands nutrition very well. He was in the hygienist movement for a long time, but I think through his journey, at some point, because in the hygienist movement, there is also the approach of herbalism and how, plants really help. And I don't know what happened, but last time we talked, he actually had a very extreme negative view about plants, and aside from the herbs that we use in the kitchen, so not the actual food, but he was like, those plants are toxic. I understand where it comes from, because in herbalism, in naturopathy, we do learn that, of course, plants need to be measured properly. Otherwise, yes, a high dose of something that could be good for you can be toxic. I mean, that's just common sense. And I think with anything, like water can kill you if you drink too much, right? So, but he had a very extreme view about it. And I feel like a lot of doctors rather perhaps go against nature when it comes to herbs and actual, the herbalism, and to be safe, rather than actually exploring how to use it safely. And that really does have an impact, because I think we forget the pharmaceuticals actually come from the plant world. It's just that they have to be altered, and of course we have the history of Rockefellers owning oil companies and so on. So the derivatives of that will create pharmaceuticals, but they need to patent the drugs. You need to make sure that you are stepping away from nature itself and then altering the chemistry so that you can patent it. You cannot do it on a plant. So those little details do matter, right, for us, because people think everything is one thing or is one way or another. And like, as you said, we have to actually say, what are the alternatives? We said it before, like, we acknowledge that there are pharmaceuticals that are life-saving. We need them. They truly are necessary. But the way that we are giving pharmaceuticals to people is not a healthy way. We're not educating. We're getting a lot of people addicted. I mean, there's more addiction to painkillers in the US, but actually even in Europe, I'll be honest, than any other drug. In Portugal, where I'm staying right now, I learned that the majority of people here are on antidepressants, even teenagers, which is crazy. And I'm like, are we looking at everything else? Are we looking at the society, like how quickly everything is changing and like how people are affected? Are we looking at how people are eating? They have a very beautiful agricultural culture here where they actually know how to grow food. But there has been this shift to people don't even want to pick up the oranges on trees, and they will go to the supermarket and buy it, because to them it's like a status of wealth if you don't have to eat from a plant and you go to eat it, to get it at the supermarket. There is that disconnect, and I think people are just inherently really unhappy because of that. Then of course in the north of Portugal is not all sunny. The winters are harsh, so people are deficient. I mean, everybody that I tested here on vitamin D deficient. So it's like, can we just talk about these things, please? So we forget. And today, actually, somebody asked me, I have period pain. What should I take? And I'm like, turmeric, black pepper. Make yourself a golden milk. Do something with it, but just turmeric. Don't take medication. And it's really that simple sometimes, right?
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is too, it's like, there's a million ways to get to these places, right? Like I'm thinking about it, as you mentioned these doctors. It's kind of a side note from the supplement thing, but what just popped in my mind, have you read the work of Dr. Walter Kempner?
Yes, I did actually. Yes.
Kempner is astonishing, right? And this is the thing, is like the thing that we're speaking to is supplements, is like, even with turmeric, if somebody is dealing with chronic pain or inflammation or something like that, and we give them turmeric, the thing that we have to understand is the same way that Tylenol is not curing the root problem, turmeric is not curing the root problem.
Yeah.
turmeric is impacting us in a way that is helping us with the side effects of the root problem, right? So all of the chronic disease we're dealing with is metabolic in nature.
Yeah.
So when we understand that we can change the way the cells function, then we can get rid of the root cause. And then not only do we not need Tylenol, but we also don't need the turmeric supplement, right? So that's what we're trying to get to, is where we clean up the root cause situation. And Kempner's work is fascinating to me because the only reason I landed where I have with my own personal diet and what I teach in Clovis is because I've done everything. When I went keto, I stayed in nutritional ketosis by blood draw for 12 weeks straight and did 2 hours a day of fasted cardio, aerobic threshold training in zone 2. When I went carnivore, I did it for a full year, nothing but red meat, water, salt, eggs. And a year later, I had tanked my health, and I spent 6 months recovering from my carnivore experience, right? So I've been my own scientist, as you would say, my N=1 experiment to get to these situations. But then I start researching. I will purposely, if I have a view on something, I will purposely try to break that view by finding someone who did it the opposite way. And this is where people use the keto diet to reverse or overcome type 2 diabetes. There are millions of stories like that. Then I read the work of Dr. Kempner. Dr. Kempner was reversing type 2 diabetes in 100% of his subjects using a diet that was 90% sugar. Literally. He's using white rice, was essentially pure glucose. He's using actual cane sugar. He's using fruit juices. So that means, just like you said, the obsession with protein. Just 10% of their daily calories was a mix of protein and fat. Not only was he reversing type 2 diabetes, a lot of these people were losing over 100 pounds on a nearly pure glucose diet, right? Which is important, like you said, too. People don't realize protein breaks down to amino acids, carbohydrates break down to glucose, right? Even fructose eventually breaks down to glucose, and dietary fats get broken down to fatty acids, right? So there's a million ways to get here, but it's understanding if we can find a way to clean up the diet and fix the root cause problems, then the idea of how many calories do you have to count? How many hours do you have to spend in the gym? What supplements do you need? All of this complexity can go away. And that's really the root of what I'm trying to do.
And what's your approach with the microbiome?
Well, so the microbiome is, there's two things that I think are crazes today that all come down still to metabolic function. So if we look at things like SIBO, or these bacterial infections, or these overgrowths that we have in the gut microbiome, I think it is crazy when people are like, oh, I'm going to focus on my gut health. I'm going to take some probiotics. I'm going to make sure I'm getting all these colorful different plants and all these things. It's listen, you can go that route. But again, you're not addressing how did the gut end up in the situation it's currently in. Most of the time, it comes down to metabolic rate. So everything that I do through my programs in Clovis is with the end goal of increasing your metabolic rate, increasing your core body temperature, and we're making your mitochondria create ATP more effectively and efficiently. That's what we're trying to do. So when someone has some kind of overgrowth in their gut, instead of being what antibiotic do they need, what probiotic or what oregano oil blend do we need to put in there to kill the bacteria, we have to understand terrain theory, which is why is our human body an environment in which a bacterial overgrowth would thrive? That's the root cause we need to get to. Because if we start pumping ourselves full of probiotics, we can make the process significantly worse. And if we start pumping ourselves full of prebiotics, we can make the problem way, way worse, right? It's really problematic. So I see this the same way as parasite cleanses are all the rage today, right? Well, with parasites, if we look at them like viruses, parasites, things that live within us, for every 1 degree that I can raise your core body temperature, there are certain viruses whose replication rate drops by a factor of 200. A 200x drop in replication rate of specific viruses just by increasing metabolism. It's the same reason why when you have some kind of infection going on in the body, the first thing the body will do is give you a fever. Yes, exactly. Raises core body temperature. So I think this all plays back to the fact that most people are dramatically undereating. They're dramatically malnourished. They're trying to survive on 1,200 calories a day in a food environment where our food is less nutrient dense than ever before. So they're starving themselves. They have all these low energy symptoms. So these bacterial overgrowths are going to thrive. These parasites are going to thrive. And we'll just take Band-Aid, 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 probiotic, parasite cleanse, whatever, trying to fix this problem where the root cause is not actually being addressed. So everything comes down to metabolic function.
I agree with that to some level. The mitochondrial metabolism is so important, and their health is very important. Nobody talked about mitochondria up to 5 years ago. So
Right.
I appreciate how important that's become, and like we actually understand how everything is driven by that. But when I talk about, I think my stance on gut health, because I focus a lot on it by I've been studying how like hormones are affected, for example. I
Sure.
think, I mean, you definitely have a good point there. We focus on the wrong things, like the symptoms rather than the issue. Like, why do we have this, dysbiosis, for example? And
Right.
so it definitely comes down to the fact that sometimes we we forget that, yeah, the terrain theory, we forget that we don't have the right circumstances for things to thrive. But then
Mhm.
when that happens and somebody would have a lot of, like, say, fiber and they struggle, then they move to a diet which is like, say, the carnivore diet, which is void of fiber, and so they feel better. And that's,
Yeah.
people forget to think that that's actually an elimination diet rather than a proper lifestyle. Like, we are not, that we're definitely not carnivores, I mean, realistically. But there's like this balance that we have to achieve as to how do we approach our diet so that it makes sense to our body. I also think that we definitely have some standards, like we have to go back to, like, okay, let's clear out the junk, let's stay away from processed foods, let's understand, the root causes of things, which a lot of people don't do. But then the other thing is that we are bio individuals, and I think a lot of times, especially when you go on internet, there is like a one fit for all solution, and then
Of
we
course.
forget that,
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what, you're actually quite unique, and
Yeah.
it's a disservice to think that you can just eat like that person. Like, because I know there are people truly that maybe have to do a seriously strict elimination diet, like to the extent that really they can only eat meat. Like, I understand that as a vegan, it hurts my soul, but I understand that sometimes people are really struggling. I mean, it's that to nothing, right? And you can't just starve. So I totally get it. But at the same time, while you do that, it's not like, cool, now I'm going to be on this forever and I found the holy grail. It's more like, listen, now you're on this. It gives you the chance to actually think what's going on in my body. And this is why I really love Dr. Will Boltzowitz, because when he talks about reestablishing health into the gut, it's like, you know what? Even if you need to start with one chickpea, literally one chickpea, so that
Yeah.
your gut microbiome is going to be like, oh, food that is diverse and I need to build the bacteria for, you can do that. In the meantime, of course, what is your lifestyle? Do you live in a
Yeah.
toxic environment? And Dr. Kleppner, like, what are you using on your body? What are you cleaning your house with? Right?
Yep.
You
Totally.
mentioned that our pets have diabetes. Like, our pets also get toxicity in the liver because people are always cleaning with toxic
Yeah.
floor, detergents. And these poor cats and dogs are licking the floor or lying on it, and they're getting sicker and sicker. And then they go to the vet, and the vet is like baffled because they don't know what to do, what's going on. These poor dogs are just getting, and cats, especially cats, cats are very sensitive.
Hmm.
They get liver issues and kidney issues, and they're like, what is going on? It's like a pandemic. The pandemic is that we're using really toxic products,
Of
and
course.
we don't even
Yeah.
understand that. So I love that you're looking at it holistically, because that's the only way to do it, really.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what we looked at, coming back to the beginning of the conversation, where it's like the how you do something is how you do everything. There are
Yeah.
so many toxins in food, but like everything on my body right now is 100% organic cotton with non-toxic dyes. Like the dyes that are in my clothes, I could drink them. Right? There's an amazing book on this called To Die For, DYE, To Die
I love
For.
to put it in the show notes.
It's crazy. It's all about toxic dyes, right? And like the fact that our clothing is really toxic. Our person, that was going back to my buddy Dr. Anthony J. If you guys check out the book Estrogeneration, it's unbelievable.
Leah, send me the list of all the books you actually quoted, because I feel like we should put them in the show notes for people to check out
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing. It's like we don't always know what's working against us. And then again, right, the blue lights. I
Yeah.
mean, people are in front of screens 16 hours a day between their phone, their computers, TV at night, whatever, like all these different things. There's so many things going into this that are creating this environment. And back to your thing about gut health, right? Is like it's the same with hormones, right? I love men will come to me and they think that if they get on testosterone, people think the same thing about thyroid. Well, if the doctor puts me on thyroid, I have to take it for the rest of my life. That is simply not true. If I get put on testosterone, I have to take it for the rest of my life. That's not true, right? What's happening is people's lifestyle have them at point A. So lifestyle has caused an environment of low testosterone.
Yeah.
Then mainstream medicine says, well, we'll pump you full of testosterone. Now your testosterone level's normal. And then 6 months later, you get
Your
off the
prostate
testosterone.
is not normal anymore.
Right. And you get off the testosterone and you have not changed your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So the testosterone level dips down and they say, see, look, I have to stay on the testosterone forever. It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You just didn't change the lifestyle. So if you want to use something like testosterone in the short term and you want to do it bioidentical and work with a functional medicine doctor because it makes you feel better right away, great. But you have to change the lifestyle alongside of it. So the things you're doing for gut health, I'm sure, are fantastic, right? But it's also, okay, let's do some things that support the gut right now and also try to address how the gut got here in the first place.
Yeah.
We have to change the lifestyle that led to gut dysbiosis. So we can support it with supplements, we can support it with oregano oil, we can support it with a diverse diet, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And also understand all these other factors that we're now talking about. Like, what is toxic in your environment that has led to this really unpleasant environment in the body that is promoting poor health instead of optimal health?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you nailed it. Even with the example on hormones, like I could talk about this with women all the time, especially in perimenopause. It's like, listen, if you are all the time stressed, you are on chronic stress and fatigue, and your adrenals are shut. By the time you stop ovulating in menopause, you will have to be put on HRT because now your adrenals are not going to be able to make your estrogen and your progesterone. Like, forget it. But that's not because because the body's just trying to cope, and like the root cause is that you're super stressed. So can we just look at the stress now, so that by the time you get into the menopause, we don't have this issue? And as you said, if you want to take a bioidentical because it will help you, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of research that still has to be done on hormones, but of course there is evidence that, especially for women, we can suffer from Alzheimer's a lot more than men because of tanking estradiol. So of course, if you're looking after yourself and you feel better if you take a bioidentical and that really supports you, and then you keep your cognitive health also sharp, please do it. We don't have to be afraid of HRT, especially now that we have the bioidentical options. But certainly that shouldn't be the only thing, because of course if you keep on having a very stressful lifestyle, you're unhappy in your marriage, your kids drive you crazy, you're just not functional as a human being. And as you said at the beginning, the way that women approach like our feelings, right, not loving ourselves, like we are in this perpetual sacrifice mode, and if you're not sacrificing, you're so selfish. There's like this Catholic mentality, especially in Europe. So it's like, no, can we just please talk about self-love, right? And so if we don't stop doing that, there is nothing you can take that is going to make you feel better. I mean, I see that with my mother. Like, she was given HRT because she truly started having cardiovascular disease. And, there are some pros and cons about it, but she needs to work on self-love a lot more. And I did say to her, this is a short-term approach. Maybe it's long-term because you need it because you really tanked your adrenals. There's no way to revive them to the point you need them. But you need to still change everything else. You still have to look after yourself in a way that you will be stronger and happier and actually really feed your soul, so that whatever you eat is not just about the food, and really heal the relationship with your body, because I think it's still not very much healed. Like I see a lot of the things coming up all the time, and it saddens me, but it's work that people have to do. Like you and I are really just guides, but we can't do the job for other people. They have to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And it is like, it's so easy to be attracted to these things. I was working with a family member who's 80 years old, and the lifestyle has never been dialed for 80 years. And that has led to a 24/7 experience of brutal chronic pain and suffering. So the question was, hey, Justin, can you hook me up with a stem cell doctor? The answer is yes. I know the best in the game. I know the ones that work with professional athletes and do the best work. But then I'm on the call with her and the stem cell doctor, and the stem cell doctor is like, listen, if we put new stem cells in your body, you are now a gardener, and those stem cells need to be nourished. So you're going to have to get sunshine. You're going to have to go for walks. You're going to have to change your diet and eat nutrient-dense foods. Like, there is no magic pill it's not stem cells, it's not supplements, it's not anything else. The only answer is loving yourself enough where you make decisions that are in your best interest.
Yeah. My God. Perfect. Absolutely perfectly said. All right. Where can people find you? How can we work with you? Tell me everything.
Sure. Yeah. So my social media handle is the same everywhere. It's at Justin Nault Official. And I recommend just go to Instagram, give me a follow, and shoot me a message if you heard anything in the podcast that resonated today. Like if you want my foods list, I'll send it to you for free. If you want the daily mirror work, I'll send it to you for free. It will be me that answers the DMs. It's always me in there. And I'll just have a conversation with you and see if I can help.
I love that. And we will put everything in the show notes, all the contacts for you as well. And if you have any freebies, I'm sure they will love it anyway. But
Sure,
also all the books that you mentioned, I think we need to put them in the show notes for sure. And it was such a pleasure to have you on. I absolutely, as I said, when we were chatting before the podcast on email, we might not have the same exact diet, but I think we are really approaching this in very similar ways. And I think it really just a statement that a mindful approach, it's actually the first step, and then you adapt it and you change it, and then we have our reason why we do certain things in a certain way, and it's beautiful. And also to give people options, it's also wonderful. But I think what I really liked about you, as to why I really wanted you to be on the podcast as well, is that it's clear that your work comes from the heart. It's not just a commercial venture. It's not about making money. Money is just an energy, result, because you really put passion and love into your work, and that's amazing. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think of it as a value exchange, right? If you do pay me money to work with me, then I want you to feel like the value that you got from me is worth exponentials more than the dollars that you paid me. It's an energy exchange, exactly like you said. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, Justin, and thank you everyone for staying on to the show. I am so excited about this conversation. Someone that actually has a very different point of view to mine when it comes to nutrition. I'm fully plant-based and recommend plants, and Justin is omnivore. But we recognize that we both really align when it comes to using real food, God's food, to heal the body, and not to actually rely on processed anything. That's very exciting, because it really shows that we can find an agreement with people that do things slightly differently, but we are both looking for the well-being of people. I also love that Justin looks at the inner side of health, which is happiness and fulfillment, and it's not just about what we put into our body as food. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Learn more about Justin. Everything is in the show notes. And please do leave comments and share so that we can keep on growing and really have the ability to invite amazing guests on the show. All right, I'll see you next week. Bye.